In this lesson, we'll be exiting out our coral composition and animating in our column graph. Okay, so what I want to happen here is scale this whole thing down so it just kind of sucks down to the bottom, and then we'll pop our graph up here in the middle. So go ahead and we'll select everything that you can see here. So that's going to be all the way down to stop the destruction and up to the coins. So we'll hit Control-Shift-C and we'll call this whole thing Stop the Destruction, and we'll call it main because we had something else that started with Stop the Destruction earlier. So we'll go ahead and say OK to that. And let's just come back here to where that begins and trim it. So hit Alt open bracket to trim that just a little bit early. And then right about here is when he starts to talk about his new subject, which is the amount of the graphs. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and hit the S key to bring that up. And I want this to suck down to the bottom. So I'm going to move that anchor point down there. And then we'll just kind of do a reverse of what we've been doing. So start that at 100. And then let's move forward over about 15 frames and take it down to 0. And I want it to go more slowly at the beginning, so we can select that key, hit F9, go into our graph editor, and pull out that handle. You can hold Shift if you want to pull the handle straight out instead of maybe accidentally having it go in one angle or the other. I'm just doing a RAM preview here, so you can see that. Let's turn on our motion blur, because there's a lot going on here and it's going to be exiting really, really quickly.
Last year.
So that looks really good. Really happy with that. Now let's bring on our column graph. So I'm going to go back over to Infographic Split, and it's going to be all of these pieces right here. So we'll just select all of those. I'm not going to bring these fish in because we have animated fish, so I'll just control click those so they're not part of the selection. Let's come up here, grab our selection tool, see if we can't get those to, we'll shift click those. That'll get rid of them. Okay, so now we'll hit Control-C to copy, go back into our main coral infographic. Just right here where that starts to come off, just starts to go away, we'll select that layer, hit Control-V to paste. And I'm actually going to hit the open bracket key so that those shorter layers that were beginning at the start will just be shifted over here and start at this point. So that's just maybe a little bit faster for us. Now let's go find that column graph. And we'll drag it up here. And I want to do a similar thing with this graph as what we did for our line graph because it's very similarly shaped. So we'll go ahead and pre-compose this. Let's just hit Control-Shift-C to pre-comp that. Go ahead and call this column graph. Okay. And let's just make this only last from that point. So we'll trim that down. And then we want that to begin at that same point we were at earlier, so we'll hit the left bracket key. And then we'll just scale this up. Turn on our our collapse transformation switch, and then we'll come in here and turn on our continuously rasterize switch. So now that's nice and crisp. And let's go over here and see if we have, looks like we accidentally didn't select that. So I'm going to bring this on as well. We'll hit Control-C to copy that, go back into column graph, and let's just paste that at the top so that we can see that. I'm going to toggle the transparency so we can actually read this. And just put it right about there. Now I want this to come on using that word processor effect that we had earlier. So I actually need to type this back out. So we'll just have this here kind of so we can read it. So domestic coral reef conservation grants. And this needs to be PF'd in. All caps, and let's just do medium for the stance, and it's that navy color, so we'll color pick that, and let's give this a left alignment so we can scale it up to make it fit, and we'll just keep that same alignment that we've had. Now, if you start having trouble, you could maybe play with the scale just a little bit, because sometimes that's just a little bit easier to control than scrubbing that value. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to delete the Illustrator, and now we'll just have our text layer. Let's go ahead and grab our word processor effect. Drop that on. And let's look at those keys. Looks like right about here is where, I'm going to move back, that's where the last letter comes on. So let's go back into those effects. And just like I showed you earlier, we'll hit another keyframe here on the slider and delete that default one, just so that's a more accurate representation of the actual time it takes to type that on. Okay, so this is looking really good. And what I want to happen is for the graph to pop on these lines here first as the text is coming on. So let's just go find that piece. It's going to be right there. And I want this just to kind of scale up from this lower left-hand corner. So let's move our anchor point down into position. And right now, that scale is at 100, so we can use our scale recoil effect. Just grab that, drop it on, and that just pops on right in time there. Let's just do a quick run preview to watch that, make sure it's not too fast. So it looks a little bit fast just as it is right now. It's happening over 7 frames. So let's have this happen over about 10 frames actually, maybe even 15. Let's do 15. So hold shift, hit page down to move forward 10, and then that'll be 15. Now I'm just going to take this keyframe, move it over a bit, and then we'll grab both of them and move them all the way over to the side. There we go. So that just looks a little bit nicer. And 110 might be a little bit much, so let's just take this down to 105 so we don't have quite such a large recoil. Great. Okay, now I want to animate on the words. So we'll just have those words kind of pop on. That's just going to be really the labels here on the graph, and I want those to come on with a mask. So let's come back up here. We've got our dollars and places, so we'll just start with dollars. We'll just grab our rectangle tool, draw a mask around that. Come down here, we'll set a keyframe for our mask path, push it forward a little bit, grab our selection tool, and then we'll just pull the mask down. Great. So let's see how many frames that's happening. Let's do... That's 10 right there, so we really don't have very many. Let's give ourselves maybe 8 for this, so we'll pull this forward. And let's give it easy ease for both of those, so we'll hit F9, but then we'll really ease it in at the very end. So select that one, and we'll pull this over just to make that really much slower at the end of that reveal. And just to make sure that you're getting the most out of that mask, let's zoom in here and we'll pull this down just so it doesn't extend so far, so you can really see that ease a little bit better. There you go. Okay, so now let's do the same exact thing, but we'll do it for our words. So our places here. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. We'll add our mask. Just like that. And I'm being careful to make it close to that place here on the right. And I'm just going to offset this a little bit. So we'll just move forward a few frames. Set our mask path keyframe, pull that forward. Then we'll double click the mask and take it down all the way so nothing's visible. We gave ourselves 8 for the last one, so that we can do that again. Pull this back. We'll give them both easy ease, just like we did before. And then the second one, we'll use our graph editor to really slow it down at the end. Great. So now let's go ahead and animate on the different dollar signs. So this is going to be really easy to bring those on. So let's have those start just a little bit after the words start to come on. So I'm just going to start with this one right here. And I want these to just kind of pop up that same scale animation so they look like they're growing from the bottom. So we need to come in and fix all of their anchor points so it's not in the middle of the layer any longer. They're at the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording really quickly while I move these to the bottom, just so you don't have to watch me dragging these around, because that's kind of boring. So I'm going to come back just in a second and we'll have those anchor points all in a row, and then I'll show you how to make that scale animation really, really quickly. Okay, so I've gotten all of those anchor points moved down to the bottom, and I just want to start over here with this first federal column, and we'll add a scale animation. Now, I want to just use that same scale recoil that we've been using all along. So it's just going to pop up just like that. And then let's offset this by just a few frames. So I'm going to move forward, let's say 3 frames. And then we'll drop it onto our next layer, which is actually going to be the matching one. So I want it to do them linearly instead of as those groups. So it might be easier for you to go federal column 1, matching column 1, federal column 2, matching column 2, and then just drag these where they stagger in your stacking order. I think that actually will end up being faster for you. Okay, so now that those are in order, let's go back over here. We'll hit the U key to look at those keyframes. And then we're 3 frames forward, so then we'll just drop that one on here. Let's hit the Alt open bracket key to trim that layer. Great, so now those are just going to pop on like that. And then we'll just continue to offset 3 frames at a time. So I'm going to go forward 3, and we can trim that in, drop our scale recoil on. Pull that over, drop on the scale recoil. And you can see that kind of once you get the hang of what you want to do, it becomes pretty easy. And it's really just a matter of rinsing and repeating. So just pull this over. And just have a few more to go. I think we actually might be able to just eyeball this because it's all the same amount of steps instead of hitting those keys. Whoops, we want that one to stay. That's not one of those. Okay, so I'll select most of these, hit the U key to see which ones already have the preset. And then we'll just kind of move and drag forward to set that up for the rest of these. And let's just make sure that this worked correctly. It looks like we might have a little bit of an issue later on here. So right here, those got transposed, and it's because this one doesn't have a column, so we'll pull this back. This one right here needs to actually go there. So we'll pull this one back and that one forward. Looks like those last two got switched also, so no big deal. We'll just switch them back. Perfect. So now those move in a very straight line, and I think that looks great. Now let's also just really quickly animate on this legend over here. So let's figure out where we want that to come on. So this kind of starts to pop out to the side here. And probably just right about here at the beginning, we can go ahead and bring this on. So I'm going to just use my same scale recoil for this. So we'll just bring that on for the matching. Let's move forward three frames. Let's see here. And then we'll do the same thing for this one. And I'll trim it, Alt, open bracket. And then let's just do a very much smaller offset for the words, but we can still do our scale recoil. So that's just one frame forward actually. Great. It's so easy having that as an animation preset. I really, really appreciate having that in there. Great. So that just animates on really fluidly. Looks awesome. Has the 12 principles animation with that recoil. Really, really looking great. Let's go ahead and pull this down on the outside here, just so it's in the comp a little bit nicer. And then we'll just come over here to the side and let's pull it forward a bit so it doesn't begin quite so soon. More like right there. And I think it'd be nice to scale this up over time too. So let's bring up the scale property for that. We'll just set one keyframe.
Last year, millions of dollars were awarded to help save the coral all over the planet. And while there are still many conservation groups working to save the reef, anyone can help by being careful not to litter.
Okay, so right about here when he starts to say, careful not to litter, close to this area, I'm not sure if it's exactly the exact place we want it to be, we'll just set our keyframe for that to be scaled up just to fit a little bit better in here. And now that's just going to scale up really slowly over time, just like that. Okay, so that looks really good. We did a great job just getting that animated using our presets to save time. And in our next lesson, we're going to bring back on that little yellow fish just so he can kind of animate through this area here. And we'll be close to finishing up our animation. So stick around, we're almost done.